For most of human history, the most dangerous place you could go was not a battlefield, a prison, or a dark alley. It was the hospital. Going to a hospital did not mean you were about to get better. It meant you were gambling with your life. Patients did not fear their illness alone. They feared the treatment. They feared the doctors. They feared the building itself. And often, they were right to. Because for centuries, hospitals did not cure disease. They spread it. They amplified it. They perfected it. In many cases, patients survived injuries, childbirth, or infections long enough to reach medical care, only to die because of it. This is the story of when hospitals were more dangerous than the streets. Before modern medicine, hospitals were not places of healing. They were places of last resort. Most people avoided them unless there was no other choice. Doctors did not understand germs. They did not understand infection. They did not understand why people died after treatment. Instead, they relied on tradition, authority, and guesswork. Medicine was based on theories that sounded logical but were catastrophically wrong. One of the most popular ideas was that illness was caused by an imbalance of bodily fluids. Blood, bile, and other humors were believed to control health. If you were sick, the solution was simple: remove something. Bloodletting became one of the most common medical treatments in history. Doctors drained patients of blood to cure fever, infection, pain, and weakness. Sometimes patients survived despite it. Often, they didn't. Another theory blamed disease on bad air. Rotting smells, stagnant air, and foul odors were thought to cause illness. This was known as miasma theory. Hospitals focused on controlling smells instead of cleanliness. They burned incense, they opened windows, they ignored the filth. Doctors performed surgeries wearing the same clothes they wore on the street. Aprons stiff with dried blood were worn as badges of experience. The more stained the garment, the more respected the doctor. Hands were not washed, instruments were not cleaned. Operating rooms were rarely sanitized. Doctors moved directly from dissecting corpses to treating living patients without washing their hands once. They did not know they were carrying death with them. But the results were unmistakable. Patients who arrived with survivable injuries often developed raging infections. Childbirth, which should have been a natural process, became one of the most dangerous medical events in a woman's life. Entire hospital wards became death traps. One of the deadliest places in the world was the maternity ward. In the early 1800s, women began dying in alarming numbers after giving birth in hospitals. The condition was called childbed fever. It caused high fever, severe pain, and rapid death. Doctors were baffled. Some blamed the weather. Some blamed the mother's emotions. Some blamed fate. Then one man noticed something horrifying. A Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis worked in a hospital with 2 maternity wards. One ward was staffed by doctors and medical students. The other was staffed by midwives. The death rate in the doctor's ward was drastically higher. Women begged not to be admitted there. Some chose to give birth on the street rather than enter it. Semmelweis noticed something else. Doctors often came directly from autopsies. Midwives did not. He ordered doctors to wash their hands with a disinfectant solution before treating patients. The death rate dropped almost immediately. The evidence was undeniable, and the medical establishment rejected it. Doctors were offended by the implication that they were responsible for killing patients. They dismissed Semmelweis, mocked him, ignored him. Hand-washing was considered unnecessary, insulting even. Semmelweis died disgraced, institutionalized, his ideas unaccepted during his lifetime. Meanwhile, women continued to die. Hospitals continued to kill. Surgery was another nightmare entirely. Before anesthesia, surgery was brutal, fast, and traumatic. Speed mattered more than precision. Surgeons competed over how quickly they could amputate a limb. Patients were held down by assistants. Screams echoed through operating theaters. There was no concept of sterile technique. Pus was considered a sign of healing, infection was expected, gangrene was common, death was frequent, hospitals were perfect breeding grounds for disease, overcrowded wards packed patients together, ventilation was poor, bedding was reused without cleaning, waste accumulated. Once infection entered a hospital, it spread rapidly. Some hospitals became infamous for their mortality rates. During epidemics, they became amplifiers instead of refuges. Even well-intentioned doctors made things worse. One of the most infamous medical practices involved treating wounds with unwashed bandages reused between patients. Another involved sealing wounds tightly, trapping bacteria inside. Patients didn't just die from disease, they died from confidence, the belief that doctors knew best, even when the evidence said otherwise. The turning point came slowly, painfully, reluctantly. In the mid-1800s, experiments by scientists like Louis Pasteur began to challenge old beliefs. Germ theory suggested that invisible organisms cause disease. At first, this idea was ridiculed. Doctors scoffed at the idea that something unseen could be responsible for illness. But evidence piled up. Another surgeon, Joseph Lister, applied germ theory to surgery. He introduced antiseptic techniques, sterilizing instruments and cleaning wounds. Infections plummeted, survival rates skyrocketed. Once again, the evidence was undeniable. Once again, many doctors resisted. Tradition died slowly. Ego died slower. Hospitals did not become safe overnight, but gradually, handwashing became standard. Sterilization became routine. Anesthesia allowed careful surgery. Hospitals transformed from death traps into places of healing. But the damage had already been done. For centuries, hospitals had killed millions, not out of malice, but out of ignorance combined with authority. The most terrifying part of this history is not the suffering, it's the certainty. Doctors truly believed they were helping. They trusted tradition over observation. They trusted status over evidence. And patients paid the price. This story matters because it reminds us of something uncomfortable. Expertise does not guarantee correctness. Authority does not equal truth. Progress often arrives late, resisted, and expensive in human lives. Hospitals today are among the safest places in the modern world, but they were not always. They had to earn that trust, and they did so by confronting a dark reality, that for a very long time, the place meant to save you was the place most likely to kill you.
Is stranger than you think. From forgotten battles to bizarre inventions, we uncover the stories that make you say, "What the history?"